private sector earnings, activities, and investments help you and drive our economies. Without them, thousands would be jobless, wealth creation would diminish, and fewer opportunities would exist for economic growth. Without expansion or new industries, our economies would falter. The private sector is an engine of growth. As the world emerges from COVID, our economies would falter. The private sector is an engine of growth. As the world emerges from COVID-19, the development of the private sector will be vital to jumpstarting our economies. In post-recovery, we need a new approach, a business community that will unleash entrepreneurial potential to create and innovate whilst embracing sustainable development. A community that cares about stakeholders and wider societal needs. We must build back fitter, stronger, and healthier. The private sector must operate differently in the midst of immeasurable uncertainty. Adam Stewart, Group Executive Chairman, Sandals Resorts International; Anthony Ali, Chief Executive Officer, Goddard Enterprises Limited; Anthony Sabga III, Group Chief Executive Officer, Anson McCall Group of Companies, will chat about how the private sector will tackle challenges and forestall the predictions that the Caribbean could become the poorest region in the world. I'm Tony Thorne, on behalf of our host, the Central Bank of Barbados, welcoming all on television and online to the Caribbean Economic Forum. Transitioning the private sector is our focus for tonight, and we look at how the region's business community will build back fitter, stronger, and healthier, and will wrap up the economic engine for all. Good night. My name is Tony Thorne, and this is the third Central Bank of Barbados Caribbean Economic Forum. I'm joined by three distinguished guests, as you would have just heard, Mr. Anthony Ali. We also have Mr. Adam Stewart, and we also have Mr. Anthony Sabga III. Good night, gentlemen. Welcome to the panel discussion. We don't have much time, so I'll dive straight in. We conducted a survey, and the first question from the survey was, do you think that the private sector needs reimagining? And the results, 84% said yes, 6% said no, and 10% said maybe. Do you think that the private sector ought to reimagine itself? And I'd start with Mr. Anthony Sabga.
Thank you, Tony. Absolute pleasure to be here on the invitation of the Central Bank of Barbados, along with these esteemed gentlemen and yourself. Thank you. Look, Hayekian theory in economic thought is widely considered. And most important of that theme, I think, is the concept of either you evolve or you evolve out. So organizations must continue to reinvent themselves. I have the distinct pleasure of leading a 140-year-old conglomerate. And whilst none of us living today were around during the last pandemic, the organization was. The region has benefited from huge protections and regulatory support, largely in the importation and procurement of and trade. Now, as a result, though, we do face as a region a perennial foreign exchange balance of payments mismatch. And I think within that, that is something that we as a region must get in sync with and must evolve around. And organizations have an obligation, given the platform provided, to drive that further.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sabga. What are your thoughts, Mr. Ali? Do you think the private sector ought to reimagine itself?
I think the whole concept of reinventing what one does is extremely important. And as Anthony said, you either evolve or you devolve. So I would say, in general, yes, I think your viewers have a good perspective, and companies within the Caribbean need to reimagine what they do. They have to reinvent themselves. And most importantly, they have to think about how they develop their capabilities to match what's going on externally within the global environment. We a lot of times tend to think about ourselves within the region of the Caribbean, but we have to realize that we're not competing in the Caribbean. As companies grow and evolve, we are actually competing on a global level. And that's really where we need to set our sights if we really want to uh, drive the economy of the Caribbean forward.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Stewart, should the
Uh,
Caribbean private sector reimagine itself?
I mean, it's a big, broad question. I think these gentlemen have answered it very, very well. But I think what Tony said a while ago is particularly spot on from the point of view that we tend to think in the Caribbean. The question really is, who's your marketplace? Are you exporting your product, whether it's regionally or truly internationally, or are you supplying the local market? But any business to survive, the world waits for nobody. No matter what's going on in our lives, the world continues to tick over and people continue to innovate. And we've lived through the last 10 years in particular with the digital revolution, the advent of social media and digitization. It's completely transformed commerce, broader than the last 10 years, but in the last 10 years, it's been unprecedented in terms of how it's had an effect on business. So each one of us every day have to get up and continue to be focused on the consumer and look at the demand, figure out who our marketplace is, and make sure that we surround ourselves with the kind of talent that can ensure that you evolve. So the short answer is, if you're not evolving, then you're dying, and the private sector has to lead that frontier.
Thank you so much. We speak heavily about the private sector here, but I wanted to turn our attention to government. And Mr. Ali, what role does government have to play as we transform corporate Caribbean?
That's a great question, a very complex question, and a very political question, by the way. Um, I'm going to distill this down to management 101. And when you look at how you manage an organization, it really is about setting clear goals, policies, and practices. Then you basically equip the people in your organization to succeed. And then most importantly, you get out of their way and let them do what they need to do. I think the same is true with government. The government within the Caribbean needs to focus on policy, on regulation, and on standardization. And then they need to let the private sector do what it does best, which is invest capital, grow the economy, and create opportunities for people.
Thank you so much. At that point, I'd like to go to the second survey question that we conducted. And that question is, in your opinion, what is most important to effect the transition of the private sector? And the two highest responses we got, 23% better policies and regulations, 20% went to ease in doing business. I want to get your thoughts on this, Mr. Sabga. How important would you say these are?
Look, as Tony said, this is a politically sort of loaded question, but I do hold a
I
fundamental
apologize.
view that, no, that's fine. I do hold a fundamental view that given the size and scale of our region and the fact that we have so much more tremendously in common that we have differences, the ability and need to accelerate towards one Caribbean, I think is possibly going to be, if not the most important catalyst, certainly one of the most important catalysts. And in doing so, I think that would satisfy a lot of those big ticket items mentioned there, the ease of doing business and the regulatory framework. The level of diversity within the various markets doesn't lend itself towards a Caribbean that would collaborate or could collaborate in a far more meaningful manner towards the betterment and the development of itself. When we discuss a Caribbean and we look at it, not many of our Caribbean states are even older than 50 years. And with their size and scale and the ability to sort of govern themselves in unison, or inability to govern themselves in unison, and this sort of the tribalism of the region, I think is an impediment in some way. I mean, that's again my personal view. I'd be interested to hear what the other gentlemen think on it.
You just put Mr. Stewart on the spot. Mr. Stewart, you want to take this very political question?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we live in relatively small states, all things considered on the world stage. I think we could learn a lot from COVID. COVID forced us out of necessity to come together to draft policy. In my own industry of tourism, the cruise ship industry, the international airline industry, the international hospitality industry, the local level industries through our tourism associations and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourist Association, everyone set aside their differences. Everyone focused on a single common goal. And as a result, the Caribbean has come out of COVID is one of the most progressive regions on the planet, and not just by a little, by a lot. Now, everyone had their adjustments, and I use it as a reflection to say basically that, individual states tend to do, and to what Mr. Sabra was saying, tend to do what they think is right for them on a localized level. The fact of the matter is ease of doing business. Capital is going to go where capital feels safe, and where it feels it can evolve and get a return. So I think government's ultimate charge is to create the frameworks, as Tony was saying, and to make sure that business can thrive within it, and the individual entrepreneur, whether it be the business or the individual, that they feel safe in what they're doing. They feel that there is a clear pathway for that success. And yeah, I have to support the point of CARICOM. My company is CARICOM at work. In many ways, it shows that as a truly regional organization, it's the kind of free movement of trade and labor, and there's a ton of benefit in the overlay. But companies are truly going to ultimately take board decisions. The patriotism dies when you get to the balance sheet in many organizations. I'm not speaking on behalf of my own, but in many organizations, to say it really is, and it really is about the ROI, the framework, the ease of doing business, and of course, as we look to more foreign direct investment, the foreigners are less passionate about the Caribbean, generally speaking, than we are, and ultimately, to the degree to which we can make them feel that the Caribbean is a great place to invest through those frameworks, then they will.
Thank you so much. Earlier, you spoke about digital business. We saw that during COVID, we had a digital transformation that Christine Lagarde said was worth what happened in 1 year was worth 7 years, 7 normal years. And any business now cannot see itself as just supermarket or gas station or anything. It has to see itself as a digital business. And how has your business, particularly Mr. Stewart, and I'll ask the others, but how has your business become and undergone a digital transformation?
COVID was a great accelerator. COVID forced us to do what we knew we had to do in many instances, or what our own internal bureaucracies were telling us we couldn't do. So in my own business, I had to find 550 reservations agents that work in our contact centers. From the beginning of COVID to them working at their home was 10 days. We had to remove check-in at the hotel. We had to remove all of our menus in 193 restaurants across the chain overnight, and get them on QR codes. We had to use digitization, meaning to go to market to consumer, to educate them about what was happening down here in the Caribbean, from airlift to statistics, all the bits of information. So the digital revolution, it didn't begin with COVID, but COVID accelerated it. And I think just about, many businesses all of a sudden were asked to work from home. And they were struggling because many were still doing manual bookkeeping, entries, etc. And they did not have themselves digitized. And they were unable to trade at that point. So in my own business, luckily, we're quite a sophisticated organization, and we've been built out for many years. But there were new elements such as what I described, just to give you a couple, and we had to move fast. We had to move overnight, and to give consumer confidence.
Moving over 500 people in 10 days is not an easy feat. Do you plan to remain? Though a lot of those changes that you made, do you plan to keep them, or you think after a year you would review them? Are these here for the long term, these changes?
Many of them. Look, I have 15,000 Caribbean nationals that work within my organization across 8 Caribbean countries. My company we're in the people business. We're in the make people feel good and show them the beauty of the Caribbean business. And my business requires over 95% of our team members have to be either at the resort or in an office doing some form of processing that they can't do from home. My own personal opinion is that I think the productivity levels go down through Zoom. I think Zoom is a great tool or digitization to get in, get out, and have a meeting. But when it comes to innovation, creativity, the sort of germination and looking forward as to what's next, nothing beats in-room meetings. And I can tell you, when we first started to get back into the room last November as a team, it was like a breath of fresh air. So in my own business, and I think I've read McKinsey studies on the United States that really shows that less than single digits, less than 10% of the United States can actually work from home. So I think we're in a vortex where people are starting to imagine that it can happen. I think elements of it will pivot and shift, and there will be more work from home. But in many industries, the hospitality, food and beverage, leisure, it's not a huge option for us. Some of our supply chain and the back end can work from home, but we never want to lose our edge of getting together, thinking, brainstorming, and being ahead, back to the point we made earlier about innovation.
Thank you. Mr. Ali, how has Goddard's Enterprises undergone a digital transformation?
Well, I would say that Adam, hit the nail on the head there. Our businesses span a number of different industries, from manufacturing to retail to customer service, and heavily in the tourism area in terms of our catering operations for airlines. And it depends on the business and the economy that we're in. There's opportunities for certain segments to be able to capitalize on the ability to work from home and digitalization. Other organizations simply have to physically be there. And I'll use an example. I mean, you cannot unload baggage from a plane remotely. So you have to physically be there to perform the task. And so the balancing act is where we can, we should. And the one comment I would make is that although we do have Zoom fatigue, I would also say that as an organization, we, like everybody else, had to find a way to very, very quickly mobilize and be able to work from home. And I was actually surprised, pleasantly surprised. I found that the productivity in our organization actually went up. People were engaged, and I have to attribute it to the overall attitude of everyone doing what's right to try and support the organization and the country and the countries that we operate in to basically help overall. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised by the attitude of people to the change that they had to absorb.
Thank you.
And if I can comment on, can I just comment quickly on something Tony said there?
Sure.
I think he's spot on. I think he's spot on in many ways. And I think back to the question about transformation, the digital infrastructure required for people to work from home. Of course, they have the physical constraints of finding a quiet room as they do their Zooming and their acts or whatever. But having the digital infrastructure in place so that they can have stable internet and connectivity is a critical part of the resolution and the future of allowing people to work from home. So I think in many ways, Tony is right. We saw higher productivity for those who could go home, and the optionality of having it in the future is just a reality. The conversation is that's the tone of where we are. But we need to make sure in the Caribbean that we have the kind of infrastructure backbone to make that possibility stabilized for the long term for our team members and our citizens.
Mr. Sabga, how is the Ansa Macau group of companies? How have you digitally transformed the group of companies?
Look, I think we've taken a long-term view, and we've seen that the view that digitization is strategic competitive weaponry. And over the last couple of years, I struggle to think of one digital platform for any of our varied businesses and sectors that we haven't actually fundamentally changed and reinvested in. As an organization, we always and already had in place a work from home policy, having invested significantly well ahead of the pandemic in collaboration tools and a collaboration suite. We were able to fairly quickly jump into it. I think there's an important point that I'd just like to maybe plug in here. The digital revolution started, and I think Mr. Stewart said it earlier, about 10 years ago. When you think about a decade back, the world we lived in and the toys and tools that we have now that we didn't have then, But that digital revolution continues, and it continues today. And as a region, we must recognize, we've largely missed it. The Googles of this world, um, and we're in the media business, so we'll see it in advertising. It's decimating advertising revenue in the region because the click to pay ads is sort of taking place there, and media organizations are having to evolve significantly to stay relevant and stay in business. Let's look at retail also. The Amazons of this world. I mean, who still shops in retail? In the COVID world, local retail would have taken an absolute hammering, and everyone would have been shopping online, and buying from foreign sources. And those foreign entities don't have the same sort of you know local requirements of brick and mortar and tax and duties and otherwise. So I think it's important as a region we recognize that the digital revolution continues, and it's something that we must get in sync with and participate in, or we will be further left behind.
Speaking of further left behind, thank you so much, Mr. Sabga. There are many people that think that the Caribbean has been traditionally too dependent on travel and tourism, and we ought to have diversified our revenue generating offerings long time ago. I want to know, first of all, is this true? And secondly, what steps, if it is true, should we take to diversify our offerings here in the Caribbean? And I am going to go to the executive chairman of Sandals Resorts International to answer that first.
Well, I'm glad you gave me the question. Look, I mean, of course, my answer is I think there's a misunderstanding of the true economic impact of tourism. Tourism has direct, indirect, and induced attribution and to its impact of the economy. First of all, the first thing we're doing is we're earning foreign exchange. We know the challenges that Trinidad is having and other countries, Barbados included, with foreign exchange. We've seen the impact across the board of what the drying up of foreign exchange and that impact and what has happened. We've seen an increase across many of our Caribbean islands in remittances, which in my view is a short-term win because the United States of America has been printing a lot of money and handing a lot of free money out. The remittances are coming home in a way that is probably unsustainable as we go forward. So tourism employs people directly within the resorts. Tourism pays taxes. Tourism employs entertainers. It employs ministers and priests that officiate weddings, not government ministers, but ministers that officiate weddings. It buys from the local hardware store. It buys, most importantly, from probably agriculture and manufacturing at large. In Jamaica, I chair the Tourism Linkages Network. And when you look at the direct impact of tourism in a country like Jamaica, the statistic is about 11% of GDP. But when you put the indirect attribution, meaning transportation in Jamaica buses are booked under transportation, not tourism. But when the airports closed down because we couldn't get our visitors there any longer, no buses were moving any longer. So that 11% of GDP jumps to 36+%. In Jamaica, as an example, we have 3 million citizens. We had 2.7 million stopover arrivals in the year 2019. The average Jamaican is eating 3 meals a day, but the average visitor is eating 4.4 meals a day. So in my country of Jamaica, where I'm headquartered, 96% of our agriculture, of every meal that we cook a day, is from farm to table within 24 hours. So my short answer to this question is, if you can find and have the success that Guyana had with oil, then you're very blessed and very lucky. But for the rest of us, what we got was our rich culture, our incredible, beautiful beaches, the mountains, the rivers, our people, that when they talk, they're singing. And that's been our win. And the bigger and better way to view this is for every industry to work in harmony together, to see how tourism can amplify manufacturing, agriculture. As I mentioned, I chair the National Linkages Council in Jamaica, and it has been phenomenal what we've been able to do in not just counting arrivals, but counting foreign exchange reserves and retained earnings onshore. So, for those that have high value minerals and resources, that's fantastic. And tourism works in harmony with that as well. But for the countries that don't have that, we are the world's most tourism dependent region. the Caribbean at large. It we're thinking about it wrong where we're thinking about eliminating tourism. We should be thinking about amplifying all industries around it, from IT to agriculture to manufacturing. Everyone should be hand-holding, supporting, and we should be focused on import substitution and making sure that we're not importing product to the country that we can manufacture locally and we can produce locally. And you'd be amazed. The Caribbean has not done a good enough job of finding the gap analysis of what a hotel uses. A hotel operates 365 days a year, most hotels 24 hours a day, and it is a machine of consumption. We should be consuming more locally, and I'm proud to say that that's what Sandals Resorts International does, and we've led the way in the Caribbean in making sure that we buy locally first and can do phenomenal things on consumption.
I want to turn this same question to Mr. Ali because I know that Goddard's Enterprises also has a very tourism-related business. What are your thoughts on this?
I think Adam gave a very, very well-rounded perspective. And the point that I think you really need to take away from what he said was tourism is naturally what most of our economies are based on. So the intent is we don't need to get rid of tourism. What we need to do is diversify the rest of the businesses to support what our natural resources are, which is tourism. We need to focus on manufacturing within the region. So I agree 100% with what he said. We need to reduce our import bills, and we really need to figure out how we can add to the core base that we already have. So diversification for me is the key that we really need to look at. What other services can we bring and provide beyond what we're doing today? And how can we supplement a lot of the imports that are coming in and have that drive the economy and create jobs and opportunities within the Caribbean? That to me is the key focus here.
As we speak about diversification, I wanted to go quickly into ESG, environmental, social, and governmental, as well as renewable energy as we talk about climate change. And many hold the view that as small island states, we need to be leading the charge as it relates to renewable energy in this era of climate change. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Ali? Should the Caribbean be leading the charge and diversifying away from tourism, still propping up tourism, obviously, but going towards renewable energy?
Two different questions there. One is really about sustainability and environmental energy, and the other one's about tourism. So tourism, it's core, it's fundamental to everything that we do, and we need to find a way to continue to do that and supplement it. With respect to renewable energy and diversification, biodiversification in terms of what we do, absolutely yes. We have the raw materials, we have natural sunshine, we have high degree of sunshine. We have high energy costs, which are endemic throughout the entire Caribbean. So the ability for us to substitute fossil fuel-based products, fuel, and look at renewable, wind, energy, photovoltaic, geothermal, those are things that will create jobs, lower the overall cost of living, improve the standard of living within the Caribbean, and we have the natural resource right here at our fingertips. And you look at Goddard Enterprises as an example. We've invested heavily in photovoltaic, renewable energy. We produce over 10 megawatts, and we have multiple projects coming on stream this year again. And we will continue to invest because it reduces our overall cost of operations. It reduces our dependency on the grid. But most importantly, it does drive profitability and lower the overall cost to operate. And so you get the double impact of sustainability, environmental impact, reducing the carbon emission, and improving the bottom line, which all of us agreed is probably the most important thing for the private sector.
Mr. Savga, renewable energy for the Caribbean, the next frontier, what do you say?
Well, I think Tony said it quite well, and it's interesting that Goddard's has made that move, and I want to commend and congratulate them on that. As an organization, we have bought into 2 brownfield renewable projects and participate in Costa Rica in wind and the Dominican Republic in solar. I think what is absolutely important is, again, the enabling environment, the feed-in tariffs and the incentives. Once that is in place, I think largely you will find more capital moving in there and larger projects becoming present and realizable. I think, I think we have a platform for it. We have in certain areas geothermal in parts of the region. Let's not talk about sun. We're using the sun, and the sand attracts the tourism, but the sun also can be harnessed and used. As we get towards, well, not get towards, I think at this point, the technologies even surpassed grid parity. And as such, the economic benefits and the returns are certainly there to attract the investments. It's just finding the projects, the enabling environment, and the capital would find itself there for sure.
Thank you so much. We'll take a short commercial break. This is the Central Bank of Barbados's Caribbean Economic Forum. When we come back, we'll talk to Dr. Anki Scott Joseph, who's our social media moderator, to tell us what people are saying online. We'll be right back.
CEF is for me and you. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum, beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum, log on, tune in, and join the conversations and engage with the experts. Help to find common solutions for common problems during this COVID situation. We fighting to protect our livelihood across the nation. This is for we to learn, share ideas and concerns, to live life like we deserve. We must change we mindset first. Build strong economies, closer societies. We all have what to teach. CEF is for me and you. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum.
You get it to international payments. Forex online. Easier, faster, and convenient. Forex online. Just register and you can make your payments. Forex online. So simple from home, not that's convenient. Forex online. To send money abroad, it easy. To your friends, even your family. Visit centralbank.org.bb. Apply online, get a response promptly. If a legacy for the family, education, refunds, and royalties. Yeah, you got the idea. Sign up and get started right away. You get it to international payments. Forex online. Easier, faster, and convenient. Forex online. Just register and you can make your payments. Forex online. So simple from home, not that's convenient. Forex online.
Both sides of the coin tells the history of the first 45 years of the Central Bank of Barbados. It salutes unsung heroes who fashioned a modern society and economy and built an institution of which every Barbadian can be proud. Perfect for economists, business people, politicians, and anyone who wants to learn more about the Central Bank of Barbados and how its staff serves you and contributes to our economic and financial development. Download your free copy today.
The Financial Stability Report checks the health of Barbados's financial system and is published by the Central Bank of Barbados and the Financial Services Commission, the regulators of our domestic financial institutions like banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and pension funds.
Welcome back to the Central Bank of Barbados's Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorne and I'm your host for tonight. We're discussing transitioning the private sector, and we're joined by Mr. Anthony Ali of Goddard's Enterprises, Limited. We're also joined by Mr. Adam Short of Sandals Resorts International and Mr. Anthony Sabga III of Ansa Macau Group of Companies. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our online moderator, Dr. Anki Scott Joseph. Anki's going to give a short synopsis on what people are discussing online as it relates to tonight's episode of CEF. Hi, Anki, how are you?
Hi, Tony. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
It has been a very interesting discussion to the point where our Facebook viewers decided not to continue or challenge you. I do, however, want to challenge you by directing your focus to the social aspect of the businesses while transitioning. You will agree with me that there is no universal answer to the problems that businesses are facing in this digital age and with respect to COVID. However, recently with COVID, a number of individuals would have lost their jobs and they would have also lost some of their supporting income. Hence, they have reduced their demand for a lot of products, more so the luxury and some normal goods. Think about tourism and restaurants. So I would like to pose a question to Mr. Sapler. Do you think we should be placing consumers under a microscope to help to change their attitudes towards consumer purchases and getting them to nudge to partake in this digital age? Because you would agree that a large portion of the population still are not too iffy with the digital transformation. So do we need to place them under a microscope? And to what extent should government and businesses be working together to develop those strategies to transcend the private sector by focusing on changing the social cultural beliefs of our consumers? Thank you.
Wow. Look, I think I think they
Good question.
I think wow, that's a mouthful
I'm glad you
of
got
a
that one.
question. But look,
Yeah, man.
yeah, thank you, Tony Ali. Look, we we're an organization of 6,000 plus employees, and I'm very proud to state that we had zero COVID related job losses. We unfortunately did lose a few of our colleagues in the maximum flight of the pandemic, but largely we've preserved jobs in a very meaningful way. When it comes to consumerism, we have multiples of hundreds of thousands of customers, and by extension, given some of the products that we do, we touch millions of consumers in the Caribbean. And getting into the science as to what the consumer needs, what channel it is that they want to touch into, the level of diversification in that, and the level of examination required, not to put the consumer under a microscope to influence them in a particular way, but to ensure that you are providing for the customer and the consumer what it is they need and when they need it. Whether that is evolved from the need to bring in your vehicle if it's been in an accident or subject to a flood or what have you, or if it is that access to that support and that much needed replacement or insurance payout to repair that vehicle because it supports your livelihood, and to be able to do that digitally and quickly. I think evolving your product offering in sync with and towards the needs of the consumer is an ongoing and much needed requirement, and that in and of itself does require, and there are many scientists in various aspects and key marketers in our organization. That's all they eat, breathe, sleep, and do to ensure that we continue to be able to fulfill our purpose towards the lives and livelihoods of our customers and consumers. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sapka. I'd like to move on to philanthropy and corporate social responsibility. Some say that in this era, philanthropy and corporate social responsibility are just simply touching the tip of the iceberg. How do you, and this I'm going to pose this question to all three of you, and since Mr. Sabga had a mouthful, I'll end off with you. But how do you lead an organization with profit in mind, but still have the wider needs of society in the back of your mind? I'll start with Mr. Ali.
Well, that also is a very challenging question when you think about it in its totality. Um, I'm going to go back to this concept of value sharing. And that is, organizations, companies are there for one reason, and that is to create value for their shareholders. Beyond that, organizations need to now evolve into how do we create value for society and how do we support society in general. And that's really about how do we backward integrate, how do we forward integrate, and basically try to create organizations, microeconomies around what we do today. And so that there's that value sharing, both upstream and downstream, that the wider community gets to participate in. So that's from a creation of wealth perspective. There's also the social responsibility perspective, where we've gotten a lot from the Caribbean, from our individual countries, and we have a social responsibility to now give back and support to the degree that we can. And that can be done through multiple avenues. It can be done through educational programs. It can be done through support of NGOs and government organizations that support society as a whole. So there's a number of things that organizations today, I think, are doing and becoming much more aware and much more savvy in how do we support the greater society as a whole, and do some of that value sharing along the way.
Thank you so much. Mr. Stewart, we know that you have the Sandals Foundation, and this is a special topic for you and a special place in philanthropy and corporate social responsibility holds a special place in your heart. Want to get your thoughts on the question. How do you think about profit, but still also look at the wider needs of society?
So since Tony gave you kind of the the high level kind of academic version, I'll take the other viewpoint, which is kind of grassroots on the ground. I think I would tend to disagree with those who say that there is not a lot of charitable works that take place in the Caribbean. I think if you took away the NGOs and the charitable organizations, the Caribbean might just fall apart. There's a tremendous amount of goodwill that takes place. I think a lot of the issue, we have our Rotaries and our Kiwanis and our Red Crosses and the kind of halo names, and then there's many that you would never know. I founded the Sandals Foundation in 2009 with the belief that you don't need a lot from a little, but you need a little from a lot. I engaged the travel industry, the airlines, and those who sell travel and make profits off of the Caribbean. I engaged our own team members internally, which I found it to be a magic stick in terms of team building and camaraderie and coming together, meaning you could have a conversation, you could be a part of the change in your own community, and you could be a part of the solution, as opposed to doing a lot of what we do in the Caribbean, sitting on verandas and porches and complaining about everything that's wrong in our world, as opposed to getting up and fix it. And so our organization, and then of course ultimately our customers. And I do believe that in this world that there are still there's a lot of good left in this world, and there are a lot of people that if you give them a platform, they will participate. So the first thing I did in my own foundation is I said 100% of every contribution made will go to the projects of the Caribbean, meaning all the governance, all the overheads, all the costs, all the marketing, everything that it costs to put it together. My family and I will pay for that. So very few charities in the world work that way. Typically you give $10 and maybe $2 or less gets to the actual cause. There's so much overhead. So we engaged our own team members. We stepped into this by saying we're not experts in every community in the Caribbean. So we have advisory teams in every country and in every community that we're helping. We focus on the three greatest pillars by my way of thinking and our way of thinking, which still remain true, which was education, the environment, and community. I would be lying if I didn't say we have a fascination with education. We love to build schools and libraries and computer labs and the environment. Back to your question about transformation, and we're living on low level coastal shores in all of our islands. It's critical. Community gave us a wide remit to be able to go in and participate. So We have 2 marine sanctuaries in Jamaica, and education really comes down to the core. So to the specific question, I really do believe that any organization, and a small organization, is misunderstanding the connectivity of today's consumer and today's employee and team members by overlooking giving back. It's not just the right thing to do, it's a duty and an obligation that we have, but it also is one of the most transformational ways to connect the people who work in your organization and bring them together in a way that's not just talking dollars and cents and business and trading and marketing or whatever it is that they're doing. So I stand very proud. We have generated 76 million US dollars in cash and kind. That's gone, 100% of that has gone to the Caribbean in the last 11 years. And I stand really proud that the Sandals Foundation is a boilerplate of how to utilize the assets that you have in people and platforms and bring phenomenal sustainable change. And everything that we do has got to be sustainable. We're not in the business of funding through the foundation bad ideas or schools without governance, et cetera, et cetera. Every element of it has to be taken care of. So I do believe we have a long way to go. But I think we as Caribbean people need to think a bit more broadly and stop thinking of ourselves as third world and be a part of the solution and not be a part of the negative narrative. Sorry for the long answer.
No problem. I'd like to go to the third survey question, and I'm going to pose this question to Mr. Sabga. The third survey question: in which area should the private sector be more involved? 43% said innovation and 30% said greater social responsibility. Your thoughts, sir, on that 43% saying innovation?
Well, I think as I mentioned earlier, in the absence of innovation and evolution, you're not just going backwards. I think you're dying essentially, and innovation is a continued and necessary lifeblood for any business. I do believe that as a region, the large organizations, and it's quite impressive to hear, what other large families are doing and businesses are doing in support of the sustainability of the region and the work that they as themselves as businesses are doing. I do agree also it's absolutely critical we break out of this sort of mindset and start to think in a fundamentally different way. As an organization on a micro level, I'm quite proud of the stuff that our 60, 70 odd organizations as far north as Cape Canaveral, as far south as Guyana, they do individually within their own community, stuff along the lines of, if a community member needs a wheelchair, if a mine needs rehabilitating, if a bus stop needs repairing and fixing, if a hamper or a family needs support, stuff happens on an ongoing basis. In addition to that, we have within our organization one of the oldest charities, I believe, in Trinidad, if not in the Caribbean, in the Guardian Neediest Cases Fund, and our our parent company also has the Anson McCall Foundation. The signature item of that was established, is actually named not after me, but after my grandfather, the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence. And since its establishment, it's awarded and recognized 43 laureates in the region for various contributions to excellence in society. And in so doing, empowering these people with an endowment to enable them to continue the great work and the great movement. Adam said something, Mr. Stewart said something, which I thought was quite important as well, and the ability to do significant impact in investing. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's actually profitable, which will enable you to impact, invest further. Capital needs success in order to keep regenerating itself. And there's a lot of that opportunity in our region, and a lot of places where capital put to continue to regenerate and what it needs to do. And I think that in and of itself is what sustainability is all about. When we make investments, we don't have a chief sustainability officer, but it's something we're acutely aware in all of the capital that we deploy, whether it be that we're buying a new production line, whether it is we're investing or considering in our innovation, mixed raw materials that we use. We've got to look at sustainability, how it impacts the environment, where it can be sourced from, how can it be sourced sustainably. Again, 140-year-old organization, and we're playing for the next sort of 140 years and beyond. And recognizing that, we've got to put in the right mix of sustainability and also ensuring that we are a responsible member of society.
Okay, thank you so much.
Tony,
We
can
have
I
a
comment on
question
that?
by. Sure, you can.
Yeah, so I agree, very strongly with a lot of what Anthony said, but I'll also like to challenge it. Refer to a study that was done by the Arthur Lockjack School of Business in Trinidad a couple of years ago. They went through 75 annual reports of public companies and companies that publish their annual reports and looked for how often the word creativity and innovation was used in the annual report. And to everyone's surprise, the answer was twice. 2 companies out of 75 actually used the word innovation in the annual report to their shareholders. And so, the question is it important for us to focus on innovation? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Do we do a good job? I think we do a mediocre job. Could we do a much better job? Absolutely. And innovation doesn't necessarily mean it's invented here. Innovation could be taking best in class worldwide and adapting it to your practices and your policies and your environment. And so I think, when we think about creativity, we think about entrepreneurship, we think about innovation, we do have a very long way to go. I think a lot of times we compare ourselves to what happens within the region. We don't look outside of our 4 walls of the Caribbean to see what's really happening and what trends are happening worldwide that we can capitalize on. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to focus on: automation, creativity, productivity improvement. Those sorts of things are what will drive our economy and help what we were talking about before, which is to diversify our economy and create opportunities.
I really want to ask you, what does excellence look like? Since you say that we do a mediocre job, but I'll circle back to that because we do have a question via email. The question is, much emphasis is being placed on the private sector for economic revival in the Caribbean. You all here represent big business, but what about the role of small businesses in job creation, earning foreign exchange, and business innovation? In short, what role do you foresee small businesses playing in the development of our region? I'll ask Mr. Stewart to address that question.
Critical. They are the backbone. Small mom and pops, micro, small, that is the backbone of society. If on a Friday, I have a payables meeting where, we cut all of our checks, pay all of our vendors, I would say to you somewhere between 2,000 checks on a Friday going on to different corporations, just in Jamaica alone. Probably 95% of those are small and micro businesses. Those are the businesses that will then, all things being equal with success on their side, that will become larger, and they add an additional team member here, additional team member there, and they become medium-sized businesses within our economies. But I think it's critical to understand in my business, whether it's a supplier, whether it's a multitude of farmers, whether it's a tour operator, excursions operator, whether it's a taxi operator, or a transportation operator, flowers, way beyond our own direct employment. There are literally thousands of we use the terminology these days. Used to be a lot of talk about trickle down, but it's pivoted to linkages, and linkages is a much better descriptive to what it is. But as we are running larger corporations, what's powering our own organizations in many instances are small businesses, and it is our job as leaders in the Caribbean to ensure that we not only support them, we pay them on time to make sure that we don't impact their own cash flows. We do everything possible. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about finding out, not sitting down in your purchasing department and buying something over Miami, with the click of a mouse because it's more convenient. We have to go out. And in Jamaica, as chairman of the Linkages Network, I set up a program with our Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association called Speed Networking, which is the bringing together of the supply side and the consumption side. Said another way, the hotel industry and all of the suppliers. Typically you can meet 2-3 people if you go to Kingston or Miami or something, in a general sense, to meet a vendor. These meetings, we're connecting 50, 70, 80 people a day. And sometimes in our very own nations, we don't even know what's out there and what's possible. So I implore every purchasing manager, every big business to ensure you do everything possible to buy locally first. And even if it's not available, find a way to pioneer the industry with them, create the marketplace, and put somebody in business.
Thank you so much. Well said, sir. We have a youth activist from Jamaica. His name is Everton Rattray, and he has a question to pose to the panel. I'd let him ask this question particularly to Mr. Sabga. Hi, Everton, how are you?
Hi, good night, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, hearing you all the way from Jamaica.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much. It's been such a rich discussion. The question I want to pose in particular is about the youth within the Caribbean. And I've been hearing so many things. And the question is, in light of COVID-19, what are some of the strategies being pursued with respect to getting youth more involved in the gig economy as a viable and flexible alternative to ultimately reduce youth unemployment across the region?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. The what economy? The gig economy?
Gig economy. Basically, doing gigs, doing small gigs, not consistent job. So I might have a gig to be an Uber driver or Deliveroo, that kind of thing. I mean, we don't have those in the region, but I guess do somebody's here on Saturdays, a small gig.
Well, I would say, throughout our organization, we would certainly have need for, and there are quite a few apprentice programs going, which would train in skills such as forklifting, warehouse management type systems. So the gig type economy, I wouldn't say is something that, those people tend to become quite entrenched, and as such, end up taking on more sort of permanent type roles. Our engagement with the youth really is, from an organizational standpoint, is shopping and seeking the best possible talent, grooming them and nurturing them to be future leaders in our organization. And at the highest level, we have a program called the Champions Program, where we would seek to work with the various universities to bring in the best and brightest in those areas. And additionally, we'd be shopping and looking for guys who would be coming in. I guess you call it gig economy. I guess we call it more sort of apprentice type programs, where we bring in young people, train them on the line, expose them to, let's say, the hot end or the cold end of our glass line, or the newspaper printing press. It's varied. Young people would come in, they'd be involved in quality control on our, beer production line. Obviously, they have to of age. And if it is that they demonstrate a capability and a talent, these people write their own ticket.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question via email. Are our governments making it too difficult to do business in their territories, tardy in taking decisions, and letting politics drive too many of their decisions? Another political question. Well, since Mr. Shirt is laughing, I'll go with him.
Look, in our states, it's just a reality that there's a relationship between public and private sector, and there should be. A politician may end up with a portfolio, elected by the people, a credible human being, but maybe they're not an expert in a particular field. We in private sector, my company, we're experts in hospitality and a handful of other industries. We're not in the pharmaceutical business. We're not in the manufacturing business, and there'll be better people to speak and advise on that. But when it comes to hospitality, there are a few people that know more this side of the hemisphere as to how to make something successful that can trickle down to the villa operators and mom and pops. But the most important thing is that we have to handhold with our political leaders, because ultimately their job is to create the pathway and to create policy. Only an elected member of parliament drafts and creates and implements effects policy. So to the degree with which we can build trust, genuine trust, where we can get to the table, have mature conversations about our economies, our marketplace, whether it's local or international, what's going on, and advise one another. And I can tell you that I have never worked more closely with the governments of the Caribbean than I have during COVID, because this was a life or death situation, literally and figuratively. So I think it's really easy to sit on the sideline and talk about the challenges. We know there have been challenges. The word tribalism was used earlier on the panel by another member. It does exist, but to the degree with which we can have that maturity, we can have that conversation, we can lean on one to make sure that we're doing what's right for our sovereign nations at large, to create economic opportunity so our citizens can live in safe environments because they're not economically challenged. People can achieve their economic goals and aspirations and go forward. And I didn't get a chance to speak on Everton's question, or I believe his name is Everton from Jamaica. But the fact of the matter is that there's a thing in life that we have to understand and comprehend. It's easy to sit down and say, we should be the next Elon Musk or whomever else, but exposure is the single greatest thing we can do to the youth of the Caribbean, and quite frankly, to anybody else. People need to see what's out there, what there is to do. And I'm really proud that every year around the Caribbean, I take over 2,000 youths from the Caribbean islands, put them into my hotels and say, look, we're not going to teach you how to do certain things here, but we are going to teach you how to be the world's leading hospitality team member. And you can take that with you anywhere you want to go in this world, onshore Caribbean, offshore Caribbean. Exposure is the ultimate transformational tool that shows people what's possible.
As somebody who's an older millennial who's aging out, I could not agree with you more, Mr. Stewart. And I'm itching to still ask you, Mr. Ali, about, what does excellence look like? But we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. And we have the Dr. David Bino from the UNDP. He manages the GEF Small Grants Program, and we'll hear from him right after the break. This is the Caribbean Economic Forum, brought to you by the Central Bank of Barbados.
This has proven to be a very productive summer as an intern at the Central Bank of Barbados.
I am learning so much in the Foreign Exchange and Export Credits Department and meeting several helpful employees.
I'm putting some of what I learned at school into practice.
I am gaining invaluable workplace knowledge in my field of study.
And this internship is the experience of a lifetime.
It is definitely preparing me for my future career in marketing.
I am so thankful to the Central Bank of Barbados for this experience.
And for providing us with this job opportunity. We will treasure it. Thank you, Central Bank of Barbados.
Each summer, the Central Bank of Barbados offers a student a chance to help change the world through a scholarship to attend the Caribbean Science Foundation's student program for innovation in science and engineering. It's designed for 16 and 17-year-olds gifted in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and is a replica of the well-known MITES program at MIT. We're nurturing young, inquisitive minds who could transform our economy, our region, and our world.
CBB 101, economics about you and me. CBB 101, economics about you and me. Understand the economy, how we live, how we eat, how we spending, that is all are we. Protecting and safeguarding our savings, our stability, maintaining our dollar, you see, that is all our Economics about you and me.
Join the Governor of the Central Bank of Barbados in January, May, August, and October as he explains the country's economic performance, reveals economic policy direction, answers your questions live online, and brings clarity to how the economy works and what to expect. The Central Bank of Barbados presents the Barbados Quarterly Economic Review. If you missed the live stream, download the recording or the full text on demand at centralbank.org.bb.
Welcome back to the Central Bank of Barbados's Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorne, and I am your host for tonight. We're joined by three Caribbean, Mr. Adam Short, Mr. Anthony Ali, and Mr. Anthony Cyber III. At this point in time, we have Dr. David Bino, who is going to pose a question to our panelists, and he is the National Coordinator for the GEF Small Grants Program from UNDP. Good night, Dr. Bino.
Good evening, God bless.
God bless you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellent job so far facilitating this very intriguing discussion. Now, without context, words and questions are meaningless. And therefore, I would like to set some context before I proceed. One of the greatest challenges facing our world and impacting our region is climate change. To properly address climate change, the private sector needs to take the lead in making decisions based not only on financial impact, but also on environmental and social impacts that their decisions would have. Therefore, environmental, social, and corporate governance need to take center stage in the boardroom. Now, let me make this even more real for the panel and the viewing audience. The energy cost in the Caribbean is the highest in the Western Hemisphere and amongst the highest in the world. This reduces our global competitiveness. To make matters worse, the Caribbean's main energy supply comes from imported fossil fuels that contribute to the climate crisis severely impacting our region. And this places a drain on our precious foreign exchange reserves. Context. Given this context, why has medium and large business interests, particularly within the tourism sector, Mr. Stewart, why have these interests not pursued the transition to renewable energy aggressively as a way to lower the cost of business, reduce foreign exchange leakage, and to contribute to climate change mitigation? Thank you. I look forward to that answer.
Excellent question. Look, you know, the most important thing in business that people often overlook is cash flow. Cash flow gives you the ability to do a lot of different things, to buy time, to move around and do the things that you need to keep yourself afloat. In our Caribbean countries, we love duty. We love to collect duty and taxes up on the front end. I am a believer in getting it on the back end, right? Meaning, rather than putting the duty on the front end, you're having, you know, everything has duty, from oil and gas coming into the country to the cars to, I mean, every single thing is taxed at different levels. And you can never tax your way. I've never seen an economy that's been able to tax its way into the future by freeing up and creating those frameworks that allow business to transcend and prescribe. And again, I'm giving you context here. It allows economic activity to happen. It allows a business to have the ability through its cash flow, whether it's small or large, to hire staff. The staff pay, you know, national health contributions and, you know, all the various statutories, et cetera, et cetera. A hotel is a very it's a high capital cost investment. My own family came into Barbados in 2015. We have over 350 million US dollars invested in the ground. We employ just shy of 1,400 people. We are in that resort producing in excess of 8,000 meals a day between our staff and our guests, all being consumed. We're buying all the different elements needed to consume and make the hotel operate. I think what people fail to understand is as you have to continue to reinvest, it's like having to transform and renovate your home every 5 to 7 years to remain competitive. So people in hospitality have tended to focus on the big driver, right? Making sure the food is hot, that you have clean beds, that you have the basic elements of a lodging enterprise. When you start talking about environmental programs, everyone thinks about it differently. My own company has had an environmental health and safety manager in every one of our hotels for the last 23, coming on 24 years. We didn't lay a single one of those managers off during the last economic downturn nor during COVID. As a matter of fact, our environmental health and safety managers wrote the Sandoz Platinum Protocol, which became the benchmark for the Caribbean for the reopening of tourism. So the short answer is that you have an industry, we have a region that we love to tax on the front end through duties and other mechanisms that makes things typically very unaffordable. It's not the number one priority for a hospitality enterprise, and many hospitality enterprises don't get to the stage where they can start talking about being futuristic because they're simply trying to survive in this new world. And I'm talking on duties on the island and the mechanisms and the challenges there, but at the same time, the distribution and the cost of selling travel is a whole nother realm of a form of shaving off what you thought was your gross costs. So that's my kind of very layman's opinion as to why more people haven't done it. But I would like to say for the record that many have gone into solar photovoltaics, high efficiency, pumps, heat recovery. My company has done all of those things, to mention a few.
Thank you so much. I wanted to use this opportunity to ask Mr. Ali and then rounding off with Mr. Sabga about what is excellence. I'm finally getting my chance to stick that question in. What does the region look like? If we've traditionally been, for a huge part, been acting in a mediocre way, what does excellence really look like?
Well, let me first say that, 2,000 years ago, Aristotle said that excellence is not an accident. It is a cognitive, thought out process that is deliberate, and it takes a lot of dedication and, effort to achieve it. So having said that, for me, excellence within the CARICOM region really defines an environment in which we have low unemployment, we have a higher standard of living for the entire region. And in order to do that, what we really need to focus on is how do I say this properly? Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. We put up all sorts of barriers within the intra-Caribbean that we compete against each other. We make it very difficult for us to succeed. And a lot of times, we glorify international organizations that come in and establish themselves within the CARICOM, and we look up to them. And so for excellence for me is being able to export our natural talent. And we do a fantastic job of it when you think about brain drain. We export our great, talented people everywhere in the world. And I guarantee you, when you travel anywhere, you will find a Caribbean person who's highly successful and doing amazing things. The question is, how do we bring that back here? And how do we allow the Caribbean to really flourish? And that sense of excellence really is driven by understanding that we need to come together. And our forefathers, when you think about the Treaty of Chaguaramas, had this vision of of the CSME. And the reality is, here we are 40-something years later, and we have not made any progress towards that. So excellence for me is to tear down all of these social barriers, all of these political barriers, and really unharness the financial potential that exists in this region to create wealth and raise the overall standard of living for all Caribbean citizens.
I almost feel like, just following up very quickly with you, how do you do that when the Caribbean is very widely touted as being on the track to be one of the poorest regions in the world? And I'm going to ask you that as well, Mr. Sabda. I'm going to ask you those two questions. Just prep that. But how do you do that, Mr. Ali?
It's a great question, and I would say there's no easy answer. What I would say is change takes time. This is not going to happen overnight. It really talks a lot about our ability to invest in our future. And I'll give a good example of this. One of the many social impact things that we do as an organization is we adopted a school here in Barbados, and we do lots of other things, but I'll use this one as the example. And the intent was, let's find a school that is financially struggling, so it's on the lower quartile of the standard of schools within Barbados. And we adopted the school for a minimum of 5 years. And what that means is we bring students in to our organizations. We give them internships. We coach, we mentor them. We allow our staff to go and teach and do courses and mentor students at the school. And it creates this wonderful impact of watching these students evolve over a 5-year period, and giving them an opportunity that they probably wouldn't have had. So that, going back to what Adam says, it's about the experience, not so much the education itself, but opening their eyes to what's available, what's happening in the broader perspective. And when they join us, we actually give them specific projects that they have to do. And I'll give you one example of it. Let's say you're a student who's studying culinary art. To go into a flight kitchen and have the executive chef say, you know what, we're going to work on a project where you develop a brand new dessert that's yours, and we're going to serve that dessert at a social function, a corporate function, is empowering at the end of the day for those students, those two students that have this project, and to go to this event before COVID and see people enjoying what they've produced. It gives them a sense of encouragement. It gives them a sense of empowerment, and it gives them that feeling of, you know what, I can succeed. And so the whole issue is about making long-term change. Now take that example and apply it to everything else that we do. Change will take time, and it will take all of us coming together financially and socially to make a dramatic change in society. And it's what all of us as corporate leaders have to do to give back to the Caribbean and create a future platform from which we can leap forward on.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sabga, what does excellence within the Caribbean region look like in your opinion?
Look, I think, and I didn't go back and read on Aristotle or what have you, but for me, excellence is that single-minded pursuit, an unrelenting focus and concentration to effect some alternative reality. And I think in the beginning, I used for me what is the most troubling situation for me in the region. Really remains, the balance of payments, mismatch. We have a thirst and a yearn for goods and services for which we as a region will not produce. And even if we can and will produce it, the technology required to do it, all will continue to come from outside. Every production line, every automobile. Certainly there are industries that, agriculture and otherwise, but even the food processing of the agriculture will require foreign exchange and stuff from outside. So to me, excellence is, whatever barriers need to be torn down, whatever intervention is required to fundamentally impact that. I think it's also critically important that we recognize that the rules of the global game was set prior to most of our small island economies even becoming nations in their own rights, in their own regards. we also as a region we face climate issues in a perennial way like no other. And in fact, when one considers, what causes these situations, they're caused by far larger, far richer countries that create the global warming, and we take we do want to get the lash for it, and those lashes are not just flooding and disbursement, they're largely economic. I mean, when you think about rebuilding and the need to retool on an ongoing basis, this sets us back. I do struggle though with the idea or this comment that we're on course to be the poorest region. If that's the game or if that's the outlook that's there, I mean, we're definitely not going to participate in that. We continue to reinvest significantly into the region, out of the region also. We fundamentally believe that the region does have and remains and will continue to have huge opportunities. And like my colleagues and friends on this panel here, we seek business and income outside of the Caribbean and largely bring it in, and in many cases, bring it in and reinvest it in the region because that's what we know, that's where we're from. And as we like to say, that's where, as we like to say in Trinidad, I don't know if they say it in the other islands, but as where our navel string is buried, this is home, this is who we are. So excellence to me, single-minded, consistent pursuit, unrelenting focus, concentration on making a difference there and achieving it, that's excellence.
Thank you so much. We have an email question, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Sabga, to answer it. Based on your experience, do you think our education system is adequately preparing the region's citizens of the world of work? If not, what recommendations would you make to improve it?
Look, Tony Ali mentioned earlier a study at the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. I have the privilege of sitting as a director on that board, and also recognizing, because of that inside scoop, that alongside the United Nations, a study has been commissioned specifically in this area, and specifically to look at what roles, what jobs do we need to concentrate and focus on. We mentioned earlier this idea of diversification away from tourism. Tourism is a huge item, that hospitality industry, and ensuring that we're training people in hospitality across the region. And there's a huge, I would say, disconnect. I was in Jamaica, attended the Sandals in Jamaica, and attended in Barbados. You get a consistent thing there. But certainly in some of these islands, what hospitality is, Jamaica have it down pat because it's so ingrained. Barbados have it down pat. But some of the other islands where it isn't, I would say, as acute or as necessary, may not necessarily have it. But understanding that we do need to tool our people for and understanding what that spectrum of desire and economic activity that we can compete in, and ensuring that our labor force and our knowledge workers are prepared for that, because we need to identify what that is. It's not just a matter of lawyer, doctor. There are many other roles that people can and should. Bank manager. There are many roles that people can and need to focus on. If they understood what the demand curve was, as educators, we can far more specific tailor the courses around that. And I think it comes down to the necessity for a regional vision. And again, it comes back to this one region. If one region, we had a one focus, we could collaborate as a region to bring all of that to bear in a meaningful way. That is where powerful transformation would take place, when we prepare the youth for what is needed as opposed to what they think is needed, and they themselves having to figure it out. So I hope that gives some insight and provides some color in that area.
We have another question via email. Should our businesses look more aggressively for opportunities in Central and South America, Dominican Republic, and even Canada and the USA? Do we have the risk appetite, the vision, and the talent to go after such opportunities? I'll ask Mr. Ali.
The short answer is yes. When you look at our group, we have operations as far down as Uruguay in South America, and as far north as Toronto in Canada, and almost everything in between. So we operate today in 24, 25 countries within Latin America, Central America and the Caribbean and North America. And there's this misnomer that being a Caribbean company, we really should not be looking too far outside of the region. And we are the exact opposite. We look at what we do, and we look for opportunities to basically replicate what we do, and we do really well, in other countries. And so how do we take our core competencies, take our strengths, and capitalize on that in other countries? It is a challenge. There are all sorts of social barriers, political barriers, but those can be overcome. And I think our group is a good example of that, where we have looked beyond our Caribbean Sea and the Caribbean shores, and we've been fairly successful. And we continue to look at how do we grow outside of the region. It also allows us to then work backwards, which is think of buying organizations, investing in companies, investing in other areas, and bringing best practices that they have back into our region to make us stronger, to make us better, to improve productivity, efficiencies. So it goes both ways. It's not just outward, it's what can you bring back by making those investments that would help the Caribbean as well.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask about Ms. Sabgo. You seem to want to say something. You want to make a point?
I just wanted to say here, all of these organizations, including ourselves, we've been for generations deploying people, capital, and technology. And where one has developed a competitive advantage in either technological and or the people skill or the insight in an industry, there really is no impediment to being able to compete in other markets and on the world stage. Sandal's a world-class organization. Many of ours in our portfolio world-class. Our beverage competes on the global scale, and quite a few of our other organizations do that. As Caribbean organization, we shouldn't be afraid to take on the world and to advance into other markets. Language is a barrier. Again, we talked about education earlier. Many of our young people are fluent in Spanish, and giving them the opportunity to utilize that skill, putting the capital behind them to make it happen is where we are seeing significant delta and will continue to see significant returns. So I would say as a region, we need to keep going brave and going bold and making it happen.
Thank you so much. One last question before our final question would be on Bitcoin. Is there a place for Bitcoin in the region? I'd answer that to
I don't like anything I can't touch. So that's for the panelists.
Well, look, I don't know if Tony, you want to say something here? I mean, I myself,
sure.
In full and fair disclosure, there is no other asset class that I've invested in the last 24 months that has given me the return of the cryptocurrency space. So I say that unreservedly. But I think the conversation goes well beyond Bitcoin and far more broadly into, and I know I'm talking to us on a central panel, but central bank digital currencies and the ability for the digitization and the ability for that currency to be able to perform and trade on a global scale. Bringing to bear blockchain technology is fundamentally where the Caribbean can and must participate in this continued digital revolution. Let's not get left behind. Let us also recognize, and I think it's important to land here, particularly and specifically on a Barbados central bank conversation, that from the Caribbean and almost specifically from Barbados, the phrase and the digital currency was coined in Barbados. And that is something I think needs to be recognized. And we should not allow others to leapfrog us and for us to get left behind as a region. I have other views as to not just sort of central bank, but looking towards possibly a regional currency. I mean, right now, if I want to pay Tony for some service in Trinidad, I've got to, even if I want to pay him in Barbados dollars, I need to buy US dollars to trade it into US dollars. And all that sort of mix and jazz in between. So I do think that this is a platform that we as a region should not be left behind on. All right.
Thank
It
you
is
so
the
much.
If I can just jump in here, not to the specific question, but I take a, not specific to Bitcoin, but I believe the Caribbean has already been left behind on technology. And I believe that we keep getting in the way of ourselves because we're terrified of giving work permits to people from Silicon Valley or South America that have pioneered programming, and you know, they're the countries that we hire to write our programmatic backends. What we do in the Caribbean, generally speaking, is a drop in the bucket. And it is my deep belief that if any one of these countries all of a sudden opens up a part of their country, literally brings in unlimited people that are industry leaders to transfer knowledge to our local population, because if we're waiting for the school system to make us be at the level of Silicon Valley or any of the South American countries or the Eastern European countries that do programming and all of this, whether it's a blockchain or any one of the back end, I guarantee you every one of these banks are going to be hiring people not from the Caribbean. So I am a huge believer in hiring locally first, but we have to have the honest conversation to say, look here, if we do not have the skill, you open it up and you allow people to come in and transfer it. It comes right back to the
Get the
element of
knowledge transfer.
exposure.
Absolutely.
We will never, ever
Absolutely.
get there if we don't think big like that. And in technology, we haven't even scratched the surface.
We are at the end. I just need to get an honest answer from you. Yes or no. Even do final remarks. Do we need more gender parity? Do we need more female CEOs in the region? Yes or no? I'll start with the two Tonys and then Adam.
Absolutely yes.
Mrs. Abga?
I'm very in touch with my feminines. So I mean, look, I think the short answer is yes. Women bring
We don't have much time, Mrs. Abga. Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure talking to you. This has been the Central Bank of Barbados's Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorne. Have a wonderful night. God bless you and good night. Thank you for watching.